Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the Nomad virtual book launch party. I'm so glad that you're taking time to join us, whether you're here live or whether you're watching this a little bit later. Tonight, we are celebrating the re-release of my book, Nomad, A Spirituality for Traveling Light. It was originally published in the UK. I'll talk more about that story a bit later. And it's finally today being released to the US audience and the Canadian audience. And so I'm so glad that you guys are joining me with some of my mentors, friends, people who inspire me that will be talking about their spiritual journey and about some of the themes in the book. And I want you to know that, there we go, I want you to know that as you're joining us tonight, I'm here in the comment feed. Please comment, ask questions, let me know what you're thinking. There will be a time of Q&A a little bit later on in the evening. Also, stick around. We'll be doing some giveaways. The giveaways will come a little more towards the end of the broadcast, and then at the very end we'll announce those who won. But we've just got a lot of fun conversations, some good music scheduled tonight. And of course, if you would like to pick up a copy of the book Nomad, I would encourage you to head over to nomadbook.org. Again, that's nomadbook.org, and there you can find links to a Kindle edition, to the paperback edition, and then tomorrow we'll be releasing, for the first time, an audiobook edition that you'll be able to pick up. All of that will be at nomadbook.org. So again, I'm so glad you've joined us, and to kick off the evening, let's start with an amazing song by a group that I have known for quite a while now, who have been really influential in my spiritual journey, a group called The Many, out of Chicago, Illinois. And before they sing, we'll hear from one of the group's members, my good friend Darren Calhoun. Here is The Many.
Oh, is it already time? Ah. Hey everybody, sorry I was a little bit behind. Whew. Yeah. Life in a pandemic, right? My name is Darren Calhoun. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm part of The Many. From all of us, from Leslie, Michelle, Hannah Rand, Gary Rand, Lenore Rand, and everyone else who's ever been a part of The Many, we want to extend our thanks and celebration for Brandan Robertson's new book, Nomad. The Many is an intentionally diverse collective of musicians and singers and songwriters that are creating music that is about justice, that invites lament, that reminds us of hope. So many times we're told that our stories don't matter. Often, and at least in my life, when the truth of my story, when the messy, unfinished, and unpolished parts come to the surface, people don't want to hear about that. Especially in churches and religious communities where, as a gay man and as a black man, those parts of my identities are often in conflict or not fully welcomed into the conversation. So for me, as somebody who absolutely loves Jesus and somebody who has been fighting for presence and place in the church for quite a long time, I know what it means to not belong. As a band, we've been putting together music that reminds people of those who've been excluded, that reminds people that the church isn't all that it needs to be, but that we still believe and have hope that it gets better. And so we created this song, All Belong Here, that echoes back to that. It's a communion song. And as somebody who's worked with LGBTQ people across the country, I know firsthand that so many times when churches find out, they decide that somehow we're unworthy of communion. Somehow they decide there's something about us, in us, that disqualifies us from a place at the table. And that's not just at the communion table. Sometimes that looks like excluding people from leadership and ministry. Other times that looks like excluding people even from your own family. Too often, people, for all kinds of reasons, are told that they don't belong and that God doesn't love them. But when we look at the communion table, we see that Jesus brought together everyone, friend and foe. The ways that God loves us is unshakable. So it doesn't matter who you are, where you've been, what you've done, what you struggle with, or what you're celebrating today. God invites us all to the table just the same. And so we created this song as a reminder that communion and the body of Christ is for all of us. And so I hope that you'll sing along with this song and that you'll share it in whatever context you're in. and that no matter where you are on your spiritual journey, you'll be reminded that you belong here.
When you're not sure who you really are, and all you feel is the shape of your scars, and you have more wounds than you can count, open your eyes, look all around. You aren't alone, this is your home. Come and remember who you are here. Do this to remember who I am. Come and remember you belong here. All belong here. When you don't know how to forgive, when locked doors seem like the only way to live, you've got more questions than you can count. Open your eyes, look all around. You are alone, this is your home. Come and remember who you are here. Do this to remember who I am. Come and remember you belong here. All belong here. At this table, come as you are, broken and bleeding's okay. At this table, eat and be filled. Come and drink in this grace. Come and remember who you are here. Do this to remember who I am. Come and remember you belong here. All belong here.
Well, I want to thank my friends at the Many so much, and to Darren Calhoun, thank you for sharing a bit of your story and your journey. If you're on the Facebook live stream, you'll see the Many's link in the comment section. I just posted it up there. They're an incredible group, and so whether you're in the church or not in the church, they have great resources. They do Wednesday night prayers of lament that our community here at San Diego has been tuning into. It's truly an amazing group of people doing some really amazing, helpful music for the church and for those who follow Jesus. So I hope you'll check them out. So I wanted to begin tonight by telling a little bit of the story behind the book Nomad, because a lot of people have been asking, Brandon, is this a new book? Is this revised and updated? What's the difference? If you followed me and my work for a little while, you might have known and seen this book, Nomad, A Spirituality from Traveling Light. It came out in 2016, and the thing is, they're both identical, but this one has a better cover. But there's a little story there. I was originally, while I was in Bible college at Moody Bible Institute, I was wrestling with my faith, my sexuality, and that's much of the story that Nomad covers. But while I was there, I got my first book contract from a Christian publisher. They reached out to me and said they liked the blogging and the podcasting I was doing, and they wanted me to share my journey because they believed this journey out of conservative religion towards a more spirituality of wonder would resonate with millennials. And so I got my first contract to write this book, Nomad, and I spent a year going through the process of writing and pouring myself into it. But during that year, I also had graduated Bible college, moved home to Maryland, And I started working for an organization that advocated for marriage equality, and I became a public voice as an evangelical who was saying, we need to support the rights of LGBT people to get married. And in that same time, I was also kind of finally coming to terms with my own queer sexuality. And so I ended up turning in the manuscript in 2015. And a couple days later, I got an email from the publisher, and they said, Brandon, we love the book. We think it's going to be great. But we've been hearing word from the CBA, which is the Christian Bookselling Association, that your advocacy for marriage equality is going to be a problem. And so we're going to send you this statement, and if you can sign it, we'll be able to keep the book deal. If not, then we might have to cancel. And so they sent me a statement on a piece of paper. It was literally Romans chapter 1. If you know those passages, it's one of the famous clobber verses where Paul says, talks about men who lied with men, women who were lying with women, and God's wrath being kindled against them. As soon as I got that letter, that piece of paper in my office, I knew that I couldn't sign it, because I knew that my theology had changed, and I also knew that I was coming to terms with who God had made me to be. And so I emailed back my publisher and said, I can't do this. And they canceled the book deal. A couple weeks later, I ended up having a story written about this in Time magazine, and in that story, they actually accidentally outed me as gay publicly, and it kind of created this firestorm in my life for a little while. And really in that time, I had kind of given up the hope of Nomad ever being picked up by another publisher. I kind of set it on the back shelf. I was trying to figure out what I was going to do with my life now that I was feeling rejected from the evangelical world, and also have just come out and was pushed into the LGBT world. And so it wasn't till about 6-8 months later that a great British publisher named Darton Longman Todd reached out and said, we see that you haven't done anything with the book, and we'd love to release it to our audience. And I went ahead with that book deal. I signed with Darton Longman and Todd, and it actually began a beautiful journey. I got to start traveling a couple times a year over to the UK, over to Ireland, and speaking with these amazing community of nomads that I was discovering all around that part of the world. People who were interested in following Jesus, but who were also deeply skeptical of some of the things Christianity was up to, and were curious about other ways of seeing and being in the world. And after that book came out, it did okay over in the UK and Ireland. Some folks in the US got it, but I kind of put Nomad on the shelf, and I thought that chapter was over. And then about a year ago, I got an email from Augsburg Books, which is a great publisher here in the US, and they said, we've bought the rights to Nomad, and we want to re-release it in the fall. And so that's how we ended up here tonight. The book is being released by an amazing press, Augsburg, Fortress Press, Broadleaf Books, amazing group of people with amazing authors, and they're finally bringing this book to the US audience. And it feels like a true homecoming. I've gotten to travel around the world speaking about this message, but to finally bring it home, to finally get to share it with the people, frankly, who I was thinking about as I was writing it, feels like a true honor. And I also want to say that I also worried a bit when the book first was coming back out that I wrote this book 5 years ago. And my theology, my worldview, my life has changed dramatically. And I wondered if I was going to be able to accurately represent the message of this book. And so I started rereading, and what was astonishing is that though I might use some different language, the themes of this book have stayed constant in my life. They really embody the kind of faith that I try to live as a Christian, as a person, and as a pastor of a faith community. And so I really am excited. I hope you'll pick up a copy. I hope you'll interact with it. And I'm looking forward to getting to chat with folks around the United States whenever we can start doing that again, about this message, which I believe is not just mine, but the message of a growing caravan of nomads who are exiting the confines of rigid religion and beginning to embrace a spirituality of wonder. So, with that said, again, keep commenting, keep asking questions if you have them in the feed. We can see them here. And now I want to introduce you to two people that have played big roles in my journey. First, this next song you're going to hear is by a guy who played a role in my journey way back when I first became a Christian. You might know him because he was recently a finalist on American Idol. His name is Jeremiah Lloyd Harmon, and me and Jeremiah grew up in the same fundamentalist Baptist church in Baltimore, Maryland. And as the universe would have it, years later we would both come out as gay. We would both begin a spiritual journey that would take us places we never believed we could be. He's an incredible artist, and he's sharing with us a beautiful song tonight called Friends. And then right after Jeremiah, I'm going to share a clip of a conversation with my pastor after that fundamentalist church. His name's Dr. David Anderson. He's a pastor of Bridgeway Community Church, which is a multicultural megachurch in Maryland. Again, that church, that experience was pivotal in my journey to where I am today. And even though we disagree on a lot of things, sexuality being one of them, Dr. Anderson and I have maintained a good relationship, and he's really helped me to become the nomad that I am. So with that said, I'm excited for you to hear from Jeremiah Lloyd Harmon and then to hear a little conversation with Dr. David Anderson.
Friend, gather round me like a fire again. Tell me even in the rain, you'll still be there to keep me warm and give me loving. Friend, we could burn this town down if we wanted, but I'd rather be here. Here with you, my friend. Here, anywhere or anyhow, my dear. You know I'd catch a train at 3 a.m. just to be there by the morning. Don't you fear? 'Cause I care. I could burn down the time if I wanted, but who can know what tomorrow brings with this unpredictable world? And I don't want to wait for Judgment Day to be found with my work on earth undone. If the sun don't shine on me till kingdom come, you know I got a light here in my heart, here to lead me back to where you are. Oh, friend, there's another horizon if you want it, 'cause who can know what tomorrow brings with this unpredictable world? And I don't want to wait for Judgment Day to be found with my work on earth. Oh, who can know what tomorrow brings with this unpredictable world? And I don't want to wait for Judgment Day to be found with my work on earth, to be found with my work on earth, to be found with my work on earth undone. With my work undone.
Dr. David Anderson, thank you so much for taking some time to be with me today as we are celebrating the launch of Nomad, a spirituality for traveling light in the US. And you and Bridgeway have been such an important part along my own spiritual trajectory and journey. So I just wanted to take some time to kind of chat with you about my journey with you and at Bridgeway and your own spiritual journey. So thanks for being here.
It's good to be with you, Brandon. As always, I consider you a son in the ministry and in the Lord. And anytime I can follow your journey, I'm here to cheer you on.
I'm so grateful for you. And yeah, I mean, when I entered into Bridgeway, it was a long time ago.
Yeah, how old were you then?
Oh,
You were a teenager, weren't you?
yeah, probably 14 or 15. And I was coming from a fundamentalist Baptist church in Baltimore that I used to attend. And it was really when I came into Bridgeway, your influence and your emphasis on kind of being inquisitive, building bridges, listening to voices that a lot of other people in our kind of evangelical tradition don't usually give space to speak. I remember one particular moment. I was in your office I was interning over the summer, and I was looking at your bookshelf, and I pulled off Gracism, and I saw that Brian McLaren had endorsed the book, and I said, Pastor, how in the world do you have Brian McLaren endorsing your book? You know, he's a heretic or whatever I thought back then.
He's probably now one of your closest friends. Welcome to the world of heretics,
Yeah,
including me, maybe.
Yeah, but you really helped me to begin to see that it was okay and that we didn't have to be afraid to talk about people who might talk to people who see things differently.
Right.
How did you end up in that position on your own spiritual journey? Like,
when you are a bridge builder and when you are trying to respect and listen to other people, it puts you in a different space completely. But if you just want to listen to people and engage with people who are an echo chamber to what you already believe, which you and I know, even our educational background has some of that, it just reinforces what you believe, but it doesn't challenge you to engage beyond what you believe, to even test if what you believe is truly foundational truth or cultural truth.
yeah,
And so people like Brian, like you, and like others stretch us without without fear of somehow losing your own faith.
yeah, yeah. And was there a moment in your own personal journey where like you went from being more, I hate to use the language of like rigid, but that's what I use in the book, like rigid religion, to kind of openness to God and openness to God's work in the world? Was there a pivotal moment for you?
I'm not sure, to be honest with you, if there was a pivotal moment, but I think there were markers along the way that caused me to evolve and grow up to different levels.
Yeah.
So if you were to see a trend line going to the right, it would go up, but it would go and then jump up a little bit and stay flat and then jump up a little bit. And so if we use that analogy, it started with the Black church, which is in some ways liberal when it comes to social issues, and conservative when it comes to sort of moral issues, if you will. And so that was my growing up tradition. While I didn't get saved or invite Christ into my life seriously until I was 18, those first 18 years of my life, I was brought up in a religious home, pastor's home, loving home. But that was one level of faith. Then when I went into the military and had to live that out now as a new believer, that took me to another jump up, because now I couldn't use churchy language. In fact, I had to struggle with whether I cursed when we were singing cadences, having to repeat the drill sergeant.
Yeah.
You know, so that was the first time I had to like challenge my own faith in the way I, express it around non-believers. And what does leadership look like when you're a Christian in the military? And what does that example look like? So that was another bump up to the next level. And then when I went to Moody, which was a white evangelical Christian school, sort of more on the fundamental conservative side, I didn't know what that would look like because I'd never been in an all-white environment. educationally. So that was new for me, and quite, I would say, jarring.
Yeah.
A black man on a white campus.
Yeah.
But then, because of my leadership skills and personality, I became first black president of the student body there, and so that put me on another trajectory. But it was a growth trajectory when it came to educational knowledge about God's word. I never knew that you could exposit God's word, and that there were these different theologies, systematic theology, and all of this. I didn't know any of that. I just kind of grew up with great black preaching and teaching, but nothing to hang it on. So now I have this. And then I go from that to working in the inner city of Chicago, where it doesn't matter what your theologies are. It matters how do you love the poor and deal with prayer requests of safety. When you come the next morning and bullets came through the door, and it didn't kill my kids because they were random bullets, but we're all very scared. Pastor, could you pray for us?
Yeah.
Well, I never had those kind of prayer requests in my church before, so it's that. And then there's Willow Creek Community Church, where I was an intern for a couple of years. So now that took me to a different level, because they were all about practical sort of theology, not just in the classroom, but practical. How do we live this out with someone called Seekers? And so they did a completely different kind of ministry. So I guess my point is, Brandon, I was on a journey of trying to learn and grow and understand. And so I'm not sure if there was any pivotal moment that made me get to a place where I was willing to have conversations with people who are different than me. But I will say there were markers along the way in different environments that caused me to be curious, and that my salvation, when I did really give my life over to the Lord, opened my eyes to a vision that I hadn't had before. And that vision was to start a church that was multiracial, because I hadn't seen any before. So that was pivotal. But how that ministry would look and who would be a part of that ministry, all of that evolved over time.
Yeah. Totally.
What he believed.
Yeah, absolutely. And notice that it says, next verse down, that Abraham believed God and it was counted to him righteous. And so you have this weird contradiction, it seems, because in the beginning of the passage it says that Abraham was made righteous by what he did, and now we're told he's made righteous because he believed God. You see, it's these two things working together, this faith, believing and doing. Abraham was declared to be in the right in the sight of God. His faith became real because he believed, but he also did.
So then what happened once he walked his son Isaac to obey God by sacrificing the son that God had promised to him?
Well, I want to say thank you to Jeremiah Lloyd Harmon and for Dr. David Anderson for taking time to be with us tonight. Both of their work is linked in the comment section, and yeah, they both played such pivotal roles in the journey, and I'm so glad to call both of them friends, even as the journey continues. I also just want to say thank you to all those who are joining. I see a lot of friends in the comment feeds and watching and sending waves, so I just wanted to send a greeting to all of you. And before we go into our next series of conversations, and it's going to be a good one, so you're going to want to stick around, we're going to be doing a couple giveaways through the evening. And the way we're going to do it is I have 3 trivia questions about the book that I want to ask. And the first person to put the right answer in the comment feed will be the one who wins a copy of the new book, Nomad. And the trivia questions, they're either, if you have a copy of the book, an original copy, you can use that, or you can do a little Google searching. All of them are findable, but also if you know it off the top of your head, you'll get bonus points, and I'll stick a check for $2 million in the book, if I have that. Kidding. Anyways, my assistant here is rolling her eyes at me. So, the first question that we're going to do for the book giveaway trivia tonight is, what other language, except for English, has Nomad been translated to? It's been translated to one other language, and I got to travel to this part of the world and do a little tour a couple years ago. So I wanted to ask what language Nomad is translated into. If you can go ahead and put that in the comment feed, whoever gets that answer first or correct, we will send you a copy of Nomad. So, this next lineup of three guests are three really heavy hitters, I believe, in kind of the progressive Christian world. Three people who have become mentors, three people who have become friends to me, and I'm grateful for their work and witness. I'm sure you know them. We'll be hearing from Dr. Diana Butler-Bass. We'll be hearing from the Father Richard Rohr, and we'll be hearing from Brian McLaren. All of them were endorsers of Nomad, and all of them were really pivotal in my interpersonal relationship with them on helping me begin to see God in new ways, see life in new ways. So, we're going to hear first from Dr. Diana Butler-Bass. We'll talk a little bit about her spiritual journey and touch on her expertise as a scholar of religion, on where we think religion is going in America. We'll talk to Father Richard Rohr about his own spiritual journey and my journey with him. And then Brian McLaren, who is always full of wisdom and insight on how we can take the best next steps on our evolving faith. So with that said, let's go ahead and join these three incredible folks. And while we're doing that, continue leaving your answers to the trivia in the comments.
Well, Dr. Diana Butler-Bass, thank you so much for taking some time to be with us as we're celebrating the North American relaunch of my book, Nomad. And your spiritual journey and your writing has been something that I've been looking at. One of the books that I used to hide under my pillow at Moody Bible Institute so nobody would see, and helped lead me kind of on this journey away from rigid religion towards a more broad spirituality. And so I'm super glad that you've taken some time to be with us tonight.
Well, I'm happy to do this. I remember the first time we met, it was at a reception here in Washington, D.C. for a religion news service. And you came, and I remember, this young man just coming up to me saying, "Oh my gosh, your People's History of Christianity saved my life." And you're telling me the story about Moody Bible Institute. And I think it might have been the first time anybody had ever been quite that enthusiastic about that book to me in person. And so, it made quite an impression. But it's a great journey story, and one that a lot of people share, actually.
Yeah, totally. And I think that's something you talk about so much in your work. You've done it so insightfully and articulately, talking about the kind of journey of where religion is going. But before we kind of get into that, I want to throw the zinger of a question, which might not be quite a zinger, but it's lots of people these days, and I've wondered this often on my journey from kind of the rigid evangelicalism that I think both of us have in our background towards where we're at today. What keeps you Christian? Why do you still stay a part of this tradition?
That is not a zinger at all.
Yeah.
I have been asked that question a lot. It was sitting in a bar in Santa Barbara with my very best friend. And she was a PhD student at the University of California, Santa Barbara. And she had grown up in a really rigid tradition as well. Very, very conservative Calvinist community that she had been part of for a long period of her life. And she looked at me and she literally said, "Diana, you are so smart. How is it that you stay Christian? What is it that keeps you being a Christian?" She's an atheist. And so I looked at her and I said, "This is going to sound ridiculous, Julie, but Jesus." And that's been my answer ever since. That question came to me, that was 25 years ago. She asked me that question. And for me, that is the continuing answer, is that there's something so incredibly compelling about Jesus, and how Jesus continually escapes the boundaries that we put around who he was and who he is to us now. And I've often felt that if I wasn't a Christian, and I've actually kind of thought, well, where would I go? Who would I join up with? What would be the shape of my spirituality? And every time I think of a different place to go, I just keep coming back to the idea that I really can't be a Jew because of Jesus. And I really can't be a Unitarian because of Jesus, even though there are some Christian Unitarians. So for me, there's this central compelling figure that has ultimately been somehow, and I don't understand the mystery of it all, but somehow been a deep spiritual, relational part of my life, is that Jesus is real to me and Jesus matters.
Totally. I love that. And I mean, that is kind of, I think, an experience I hear a lot among us progressives is like either one of two things. It's that the morals and ethics of Jesus are compelling for us in our day, which there's obviously a side of that, or we've had some sort of experiential encounter, ongoing relationship, whatever that looks like. And that might weird people out from different perspectives to hear that, but that's so true. As it's like, I feel the same way. I've encountered this Jesus multiple times throughout my life on this journey. And it's like, as much as I want to get away sometimes, as much as I want to divorce myself from Christianity and all the things it's kind of come to represent, kind of stuck almost. It's like, can't get away from him.
Yeah, I can't either. And at this point, I really don't want to, because I find that it is that Jesus is even more compelling to me now than when I answered that question 25 years ago. And so I just keep on the path. And just my sense is that even though people misinterpret Christianity, people use it for ill, people use it for exclusion, people use it to exclude me, that doesn't matter to me. You know, you can use anything for evil and it doesn't make it so. So I still call myself a Christian. I still hang out with Jesus, and struggle, as many of us do, to find a community that helps our hearts to sing. Totally.
And you're also, you're involved you're a member of the Episcopal Church. And I think during my spiritual journey at Moody, I discovered, and I didn't realize this was happening, but there was a large group of millennials coming from the evangelical kind of congregationalist even tradition, where there wasn't a lot of ritual, there wasn't a lot of rootedness to our faith, kind of wandering in, whether it was to the Episcopal Church or the Anglican Church of North America or the Lutherans, whatever it was. There was this journey towards rootedness. And I wonder if you have any insights, because I know you've thought about this a lot, like what is it that is driving, even to this day, like it's been 5 years since I first wrote about this, and I still feel like the Roman Catholic Church, in various ways, like these liturgical rooted traditions are compelling younger people, or at least a good segment of those who are still remaining in organized religion.
Yeah, I've noticed that there's a really historical pattern at play here. It's one that I hope to be writing about fairly soon. And what it seems to be the case in American Christianity is that American Christianity goes through these huge periods of incredible evangelical enthusiasm, and lots of people become evangelicals, and then it wanes for one reason or another. And what seems to happen in those waning times, and I've now been able to track this to the 1820s, the 1840s. The 1860s are out for anything because of the Civil War, so they don't count in any pattern. The 1880s, the 1920s, the 1940s, the 1960s, and the 1980s. So it happens fairly regularly, about every 20 years in American religious history, after huge periods of evangelical enthusiasm, that a good number of people leave evangelicalism and they join high church, more traditional churches. And sometimes it's Roman Catholic, sometimes it's Eastern Orthodox, sometimes it's Anglican, sometimes it's Lutheran, or some mix thereof. But it does seem to be almost like the alternative to evangelical religion. You know, if you're trying to escape something that was uncomfortable and that didn't fit you right, and that, you know, you found limiting as an evangelical, if you have wandered into one of these historic churches, you think, oh my gosh, I've just discovered this thing. Well, there was a big movement of evangelicals who did that, in the 1980s, and there was a big movement of evangelicals who did that in the 1960s, and you can count these years back. And so I think it's really fascinating that the romantic, traditional, and even more orderly kinds of forms of Christianity are sort of alternatives to the evangelical impulse. So I don't know if that says anything more than, in effect, the high church movements being a kind of backlash to American evangelicalism. And with your generation, whole bunches of millennials, biggest generation in American history, and so many people who were raised in very conservative evangelical churches, implicated and complicit with the religious right politically. To have all these people leave now in their 20s and 30s, it makes perfect sense to me that a good number of them have landed in these more traditional places. And you know what the big secret is?
What is it?
They probably won't stay.
Mm.
And I would have never said that 20 years ago. And yet now I can see in my own life how I needed the swing between those two things. And I loved, I gained so much from the Episcopal Church, and I still am formally a member of the Episcopal Church. But I have to confess that, frankly, there are things there spiritually and theologically, and especially in terms of the polity, the governance structure, and the way the church is ordered in terms of ministries, those things, that I find far less satisfying than I did 10, 15 years ago. Yeah. And so I find myself now sitting in a community that I love, with many people that I love, and beautiful traditions that I have embraced from that. And I also think to myself, wonder where next?
Yeah, thank you for that. And I wonder, do you think there is next in a religious tradition? Do you suspect?
I think, well, you wrote a book called Nomad. Was this big evangelistic campaign that was sponsored by Campus Crusade by Christ. It was a big national advertising campaign. It was called the I Found It campaign. And I had this little yellow Dodge Colt. That was my first car. And I was a very enthusiastic evangelical. And I got this bumper sticker. It was bright green with white lettering and said, "I found it!" exclamation point. And of course, what Campus Crusade wanted everyone to do is to ask the person with the bumper sticker, "What did you find?" And I think about that so much even now, is that every time I put an "I found it" bumper sticker on my car, I have to eventually take it off.
Yeah.
Because something else keeps finding me and disrupting my certainties. And I used to kind of feel that was wrong somehow. You know, I used to feel like, oh, but what if I'm not stable? What if, shouldn't I, you know, if I was a really mature person, I'd just find this one thing and I'd really stick to it. Well, I don't think that God is like that. And I certainly don't think that Jesus is like that. Is that this is the whole message of Jesus is follow me, not find me.
Yeah.
So anyway, I just think that, and it doesn't mean that we have to change churches every week or feel like we're, you know, inveterate religion shoppers or what have you. What it means is we have open souls, and that we have listening ears, and hearts that are attuned to the direction that Jesus is going. And so, you know, I might stay a member of the Episcopal Church till I die, but that does not mean that I'm going to be the same kind of Episcopalian when I die as when I joined the church when I was 21 years old.
Yeah.
And
Totally.
that's something I think people don't always understand. You know, they think, I found it. Okay, this is it. I can't change again. I've got the right answer this time. And as soon as you get there, you'll be taking the bumper sticker off your car.
Yeah, no, totally. Hearing you say that reminds me, somebody I talk about in the book, but somebody I know is a colleague of yours and someone I looked up to, Phyllis Tickle. She was kind of deeply in tradition. I actually have her prayer book over here, but I remember talking to her one time and she was like, yeah, Brandon, and I go to an evangelical church sometimes, and I like truly embodying this, like, yes, I've had a lifetime of commitment to this particular tradition, and
right,
like I just felt like she embodied that nomadic spirit so well. And I think what you're articulating is exactly what I think I saw her embodying at the end, towards the end of her life. So yeah.
Well, I hope it's not quite the end of my life.
No.
But,
only no. Yeah.
She was quite a friend to me, and a mentor, and my neighbor in Memphis, Tennessee, actually, when I lived there for 3 years. And that's where I met her. And I'm sure her influence wore off. But you know, the thing is, I mean, it's really interesting to me. Just in the last 2 years, I've gotten to be friends with a lot more young clergy who are basically starting churches, and they're post-evangelical churches. And they've become some of my favorite churches in the United States. I love preaching in those congregations. I love having theological discussions with the ministers. You know, that there's a kind of a energy and openness that really kind of reminds me of the very best of evangelicalism, which I feel like I experienced in the late 1970s when I was in college in California. And so, you know, I love that. So I feel much like Phyllis these days. You know, I sometimes go to a silent Quaker meeting, which is near my house, and that building was put up in the 1850s, I believe. It's one of the oldest in this neighborhood. And so I go there. I sometimes go to a Methodist church in downtown DC that I love, Foundry. It's really liberal, and it's great integrated congregation, has a wonderful gospel choir. I sometimes, you know, I go a lot to my own Episcopal churches, and I go to a Celtic Eucharist, and I go to a traditional Eucharist. And I go to these post-evangelical churches, and I love your tradition. Oh my gosh, I think the Disciples of Christ, with this amazing sort of centrality of the table, I think it's one of the most overlooked religious traditions in the United States, and has enormous wisdom about how you create community around God's meal. So that's me these days, you know.
Totally.
I preached at a Jewish synagogue not long ago, and spoke there, and I do that about once a year, and I love that too. Oh my gosh, it's so there's so much more.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, thankfully, even COVID has allowed us the opportunity to really be nomads, in a sense. Like, you can pop into any religious service you want. But I think you're right. I think after this is done also, lots of people are going to be wondering why. I know we're, as clergy, wondering, like, why do we do what we do every week? Like, it's not, honestly, our staff is just asking, like, it kind of feels rote and not helpful because we're doing it digitally now. And it's like, well, maybe people are going to be asking, why do I go back to the same tradition every week? Why not explore a little bit more? Why not whatever it might be? And I just, the sense I get, at least here in San Diego, is that the other side of this moment of history is going to be truly more nomadic in religious circles. And I don't think the churches are going to retain the big congregations they might have once had when COVID started.
Well, that's a really interesting observation, and I suspect that it's true. And, I think that the thing that I like about your work, and I hope the thing that you find in my work, is to have that kind of nomadic openness does not mean that you are uncommitted to something.
Mm.
And it doesn't mean that you are shallow. And see, that's what I think happens in the United States is that we say, oh, you're a church shopper, you're a nomad. Oh, so you don't really believe anything. Or you're deep into a particular tradition. Oh, and then you're kind of the real thing over here. You can really have both influences. You can really do both. I mean, literally, I have spent 40 years of my life now studying the same subject, and that is religious studies, church history, theology, and practicing things that emerge from all different parts of that tradition, and letting myself go deeply into them. So everything from the loving the gospel choir and understanding things about African American music and song and poetry, to the deep cadences of the Anglican prayer book, to centering prayer like you might practice at a monastery. And I know a lot and feel attached to all of those things. And so I can be attentive to a number of different traditions and know them with a level of depth and even commitment, without necessarily saying, oh, if I only have to be this one thing.
Yeah.
And so I think that kind of multiplicity of religious practice, that's the piece that you call nomad. And I think that some people might interpret that wrongly by saying that you're always sort of unattached or you're always floating. But the truth of it is, it's a whole different sensibility that actually can embrace multiple truths at the same time.
Yeah.
And hold them very closely and know that you can be rooted in a garden that grows a lot of different fruit.
Totally.
And so I really would hope that people would understand nomad as a positive term in that way. It's not an escape. It's not a failure to commit. It's a different disposition towards the tradition and towards the practices and towards what it means to be steeped in those things.
Totally. Thank you for that. And I think you do embody, your work embodies that so well. And getting to know you a little bit, you definitely embody both the nomadic spirit, but also, I mean, I think it's even how you articulated the first answer, like there is something to Christianity not to just be discarded, which is, I also think, a common tendency in our ex-evangelical kind of world. But I just want to say thank you so much for taking some time to be with me tonight. Thank you for your work and witness in the world. And thank you for looking at and helping and endorsing the book 5 years ago. I appreciate you and appreciate all that you've done. So.
Oh, I'm so glad that it's going to find new readers and that you'll find new people who can be part of your community and hear your voice, because you have such a valuable perspective to offer. And I've always treasured our time together. So thank you for being you.
Thank you so much. Well, I think just to start, in the final chapter of the book, I tell this story about the first time that I met you in person. And I'm actually, those who are watching right now on the book launch day will see, I'll play a little clip of it.
Now it's called universalism. The assumption is, if God is victorious, then God is victorious. God doesn't lose. That's what it means to be God.
Because it's such a funny thing. I was a Bible college student at Moody Bible Institute in Chicago. you were in town doing a conference with Lawrence Freeman, and I set up an interview, me and my friend, to come out, and we were so nervous because, one, you were a heretic in our book, and
I
two,
was nervous.
what was
Or
that?
I was nervous, or you were nervous?
I was nervous.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Yeah. And
Talking to a heretic. As you know, from a Catholic side, that just sounds ridiculous. But
yes.
anyway, please, I understand. I totally understand.
In that moment of my faith journey, yeah, it was. I was super compelled by what you were up to, and yet, I mean, even just being a Catholic from our worldview made you outside of our standard of orthodoxy.
Sure.
And what I tell in the last chapter of the book is that the way you interacted with us was, one, even as we were acting like semi-fundamentalists in some ways, asking kind of ridiculous questions.
I have no memory of that happening, but go ahead.
I'm glad.
I remember the meeting, but I didn't remember you being especially fundamentalist. Yes.
Yeah, we were asking questions about you being a universalist and things like that.
Oh,
but
yeah, the typical. Yeah.
Yeah. And you were so gentle with us, even as we potentially disagreed with you. And I feel like that's one that opened me up in a way to begin to actually explore what you were saying and doing, just because you were embodying this gentleness. And I also feel like that's a lost art in today's dialogue, that when we're sitting across from people who we might disagree with, there's so much fear and polarization that we don't have the ability to be gentle. And I just wonder if you can talk about maybe how we could be more gentle with those who disagree or see the world differently than us.
Wow, what a beautiful question at this time, and so needed. I think it has a lot to do with fear and not being afraid of being wrong or humiliated or attacked. If any of those apply, you can't be gentle. You've got to be harsh and adamant and clear and defining. And I don't feel that need. Now, maybe that's the advantage of age. It might be no more than that. But my memory of you is you were very respectful. So I had no reason to be defensive. So if I was gentle, you helped me do it. But maybe that's the answer, that we've got to help people today be gentle by not going on the attack, by not waiting to humiliate those gotcha moments we talk about,
Totally.
Be what the journalists just love, because they're the only thing worth writing about from their side.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate, very unfortunate.
Yeah, especially for people who are who have good reasons to be fearful. I wonder, because I've actually been really wrestling with that as my tripod starts tipping over. I've been wrestling with that question. Sorry.
With
Technology.
what question, Brandon? I don't.
Sorry, my camera's falling over.
That's all right. I'll take your time.
But the question of, for people that actually have reasons to be afraid, people that have real threats against them, what is the role of civility there? What is the role of gentleness there? Do you have any insight on that?
I think a lot of people think they've got to be strong, or they're not convicted. They're not assured. Faith is certitude. And you've heard me say, the opposite of faith is not doubted, it's certitude.
Yeah.
Because that brand of faith has been so taught, it's created several generations of people who walk around needing to defend their certitudes. It's really so sad because it keeps them from being humble and honest. No one likes being around someone who isn't humble or honest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally.
But when you've got to pretend you're certain, and then defend those certitudes, you're set up to be a not very enjoyable conversation partner.
Yeah.
At least it seems to me. Yeah.
Well put. And on that journey, it feels like certainty. I understand why people crave it, right? We live in a world of so much instability.
Yeah.
And the spiritual journey, I feel like we all know the different works of Fowler and other folks who talk about stages of faith and growth and different perspectives you can take. Your own spiritual journey has been quite a wild ride. I mean, I remember hearing you talk about being a younger new priest who's baptizing, seeing people being baptized in the Holy Spirit and speaking in tongues. Yeah. And then today you're kind of, some people might use language of, even though I know you wouldn't use this language, some people might say New Age. You're kind of affiliated, you've been on Oprah, so of course you're New Age. How does that spiritual journey unfold? How does one go from kind of what seems like a more traditional version of Christianity to a more expansive spirituality?
Actually, the one leads directly to the other, precisely because I'm so rooted in tradition and have spent much of my life trying to connect the dots of the tradition. What's the real big T tradition and what's just custom? That frees me to say things in what sounds like a radically new way. I mean, it really isn't. You perhaps have read my book on the Trinity. I mean, it couldn't be much more traditional, and yet most of the metaphors I'm using in there are ones that contemporary people have never heard. Why? Because most of them are not Trinitarian.
Yeah.
Most of the Christian church is not anything Trinitarian except in name. And that's Catholic and Protestant, both.
Totally.
We kept the word, but any real sense that this was giving us the shape of God, we weren't interested in that, it seems.
Yeah. Yeah, I really love that.
Yeah, for me, it's direct. My latest small book out is a rewrite of an earlier book called Order, Disorder, Reorder. I don't know, the wisdom pattern. And that's much to the point of that whole book. That the going through the necessary disorder, or at least what looks to outsiders, and maybe even to yourself as disorder, is really the necessary purification to lead you to reorder. But people who haven't gone through that cycle, all they can keep defending is order, as they naively, almost in an adolescent way, understood it. Yeah.
I love that. I think that one of the themes that I touch on in the book is precisely that, both the desire for rootedness, because I feel like so many of us, especially me, coming from an evangelical tradition, was given a tradition that had no foundation. It was all about newness. It was all about innovation. And there's been a huge influx. I think one of the reasons you're so popular among younger millennial people is because you're connected to a tradition that gives narrative and story, and doesn't feel like it's just emerging out of nowhere and is aloof.
Well, thank you. That says a lot about you, that you can see that.
Totally.
Because I have no authority to say the things I do unless I'm standing on a long, long lineage. A lineage that keeps reappearing. And that's, for me, what it means to be Catholic, which, as you know, means universal. So that's why when you call us universalists, we're quite happy.
Yeah. I love that. So kind of the two more questions, but one came as I was talking to some friends about folks like you who have been influential in spiritual formation for so many people. As we become more open and more progressive, a lot of people begin asking the question, why should I stay within this Christian tradition, especially with what Christianity looks like on the public stage right now? Why are you still a Christian?
You know, the older I get, the more I realize that individualism, almost more than anything, has destroyed the transformative power of the gospel by each of us seeking a private salvation apart from you and her and the other. That's just not salvation. Huh? It makes you rely far too much on yourself. And here's a line of thought I've just come to. I think this post-truth society we're living in right now with this president could have never happened unless people were as individualistic as he is. You know, when it's all about you, when you don't have to learn from anybody else, rely upon anybody else, be president for 4 years without reading a book. There's another, forgive me for talking about direct lines, but there's a line from the individualistic interpretation of the gospel to the anti-intellectual understanding of the gospel. That, I mean, today he's talking about witch doctors. I don't know, you probably haven't heard him, but sort of, I just wonder what the educated people of Europe are saying about the President of the United States. You don't have to use this at all. It's probably better that you don't. But my real point is individualism has really done us in. Done us in. And I'm afraid, no offense, you're even worse in that than we are because of this private notion of salvation. And that's what I talked about in my Universal Christ book, you know. Salvation is a social notion, which you call universalism, not you.
Well, now I use the label quite happily. I'm a universalist, and your Catholic definition of it is quite nice as well. So,
good.
So I wonder, the last big question is, obviously, these are strange times that we're living in. And it seems like there are dark storm clouds all over the place. Even, I mean, speaking as somebody who represents a religious institution, a church that I'm sitting in right now, like, we're even thinking about, like, are churches going to survive? Is faith as we know it going to survive?
Yes.
I wonder what you see in the future as signs of hope. Are there things in the midst of all of this that is happening over the past year in particular, where you see potential for growth or reformation or reasons to be hopeful?
You know, most of the historic reformations were, in fact, almost all of them, as I know history, and I'm no historian, but I'm a student of history, they were all reactions. Now, not that we aren't reacting to, but what makes me so excited is so many people who are building new parachurch phenomenon, which is probably what you have there. They aren't reacting, they're just going to the side and saying, let's build something new. Now, for a Franciscan, that's exactly what St. Francis did. He didn't leave the Catholic Church. He went to the side and sort of, if the truth be told, didn't pay much attention to it, you know, really. And said, I'm going to do it better. And quietly, humbly did it better. That's so many people are doing that. Is my hope. That they're non-reactionary, so they don't start with a negative bias of reforming, protesting. I mean, those words give away the mindset. Because then you've got to pretend you're better, and that sends you on the wrong trajectory, because you're never any better. You're equally sinful as the group you left, you know, and will make equal amount of mistakes. But to know that from the very beginning will keep you humble and honest. There we are, back to those two again.
Totally. I love that. And again,
good questions, Brandon.
Yeah. Well, you talk about Francis, and it also, Francis probably got a lot of that. It sounds very Jesus-y. I hadn't thought about it that way, but being on the margins, on the edges of the religious institution seems to be where all the life actually springs from.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's really true.
So,
There isn't much energy standing at the center. You just have to keep defending.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pray for Pope Francis. I hear that.
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Father Rohr, I'm really grateful for one, the impact you've had on my journey and on this book, Nomad in particular. And I'm just so glad to get a chance to chat with you and see you today. So thanks for taking some time.
Such good questions. You really do.
Well, Brian McLaren, thank you so much for taking some time to be with me tonight as we celebrate the US release of Nomad, A Spirituality for Traveling Light. And you're such an important figure along my own personal journey because you were one of the first so-called liberals that I ever encountered. I remember my pastor, Dr. David Anderson, connected me to you via email when I was back at Moody Bible Institute. And when we talked for the first time for a podcast I had back then, it was really your humble, curious, Christ-like spirit that was responding to some very conservative, maybe naive questions that me and my co-hosts were asking that really began to open me up and begin to think that maybe there was another way to be Christian, maybe there was a better way to be Christian. I just wonder, how did you end up kind of moving from a more rigid religion to this posture of humility and wonder and awe that you embody so well?
Well, that's nice of you to say, Brandan. My goodness, we've all been on quite a journey, haven't we? And I'm just remembering when I first made contact with you. You know, Brandan, here's the weird thing. When I was growing up, to be an evangelical, to be a Christian, meant that you valued humility, you valued gentleness, you valued kindness, you valued forgiveness. And I just don't even know how true that is anymore for a lot of folks. Especially, it feels like folks have been converted by the religious right, and especially they've been, in a sense, remade in the image of our current president. So that now braggadocio and this sort of toxic masculinity, all the rest gets mixed into that. So, those issues of humility, those virtues of humility and gratitude and kindness, man, my parents exemplified it. The pastors and religious leaders I knew really exemplified that. But one thing we did do is we lived our lives in opposition to anyone who was less conservative than we were. And anyone who got labeled with that word liberal was seen as dangerous. Well, the effect of creating that boogeyman, that, scary danger lurking around the next corner, that created a certain fear which kept everybody conservative. And for some of us who start asking questions, and we just can't live within that very small sheepfold, so to speak, we have to get out and explore some greener pastures, and whether it's curiosity or whatever. The only other thing I would say that had a big role for me is I had some very powerful spiritual experiences at a young age that let me know that God was bigger than what could be contained in anybody's box.
Totally. And I think that role of spiritual experience, in some senses, it's interesting how, like, our evangelical tradition from which we come from, in some senses emphasizes the need for a spiritual experience to be converted, but then downplays kind of that experiential, subjective experience. And yet that is, in most of the mystical traditions that I've read, at least, like, that subjective encounter with the divine is the basis of spiritual life.
Yeah, it's kind of weird, isn't it? I mean, a subjective encounter then becomes objective data to start working with. So it's, but there are reasons people are careful about that. But here's the thing that happened to me that just about derailed me from actually becoming a nomad, a person on a journey. I had this idea that if this group is wrong, then this group might be right, or that group might be right. So the idea was I'm in one static location. Maybe I'm willing to move to join another static location. So maybe we're non-charismatic and we join the charismatic crew. Now we're right. Or maybe we're charismatic and we join the Calvinist crew. Now we're right. It's very different to think, oh, I'm just in the wrong static location. I have to choose another static location. But I think what your book explores and what I found to be true is actually deeply resonant with Jesus, whose first and last words were, follow me, right? I'm going somewhere. I'm leading you somewhere. It was an invitation to a journey. Ironically, picking up the theme of Abraham, who's called out on a journey even though he doesn't know where he's going, and Moses, who's on a journey, and the children of Israel who are on a journey. So it's such a deep biblical theme, but I think there was a kind of religious sociology that we didn't even know we had because we were so focused on whether we were interpreting this or that Bible verse the correct way.
I love that. And I think one other aspect of your work that has really been influential early on, I remember that when the Hellbound movie came out and you were a part of that, there was, for me, it was really one of the first times that I seriously and critically began to think about and engage with the development of Christian history and doctrine.
Yes.
And, Bart Ehrman also has this great book, The Triumph of Christianity, where he kind of outlines exactly this case where Christianity started as this nomadic, humble justice movement and turned into a religious movement of power and privilege and empire.
Yes.
Today, that's what Christianity, by and large, is known for. And so,
at least white Christianity, right?
Good point. And I wonder why. A lot of people have asked me, why still consider yourself part of this thing? Why not leave it behind? And so I wonder what you might say to that.
Well, the irony is I have a book coming out January of next year called Faith After Doubt. And then January of the following year, I have a book coming out that I'm in the middle of writing now that's called Do I Stay Christian? And so I'm grappling with that exact question. And what I do in the book is the first third of the book is I just say, do I stay Christian? No. And I write 10 chapters on good reasons not to stay Christian. And then the next part is called Yes. And I have 10 chapters on good reasons to stay Christian. And then the third part is, I'm not sure what I'm going to call it yet, but it might be How. And the idea there is whether or not you decide to stay Christian, there's probably some things you ought to take seriously either way. So that's kind of how the book is shaping up. But look, the reasons I would leave Christianity are the same reasons I would like to leave the human race. In other words, the worst of Christianity is the worst of the human race, and it happens to be the worst of Islam and the worst of Judaism. And so we're sort of stuck with this human race. And I'm not saying I think there are very good reasons for people to leave Christianity, but sooner or later we have to realize that we're all part of the mess that we're in together. And so what I would say is the idea that I want to disassociate myself to be pristine and pure in some other setting is a little bit of a scary idea. I guess I'm at a point where I'm willing to say the Christian religion is a mess. But I think there's something at the core of the Christian vision at its best, and the Christian message at its best, and in Christian spirituality at its best. So I want to embody the best, and I want to own the worst. How does that sound?
I love that. I hope that more and more, and I do feel like more and more people are waking up to be able to critique this thing that we're a part of, but also realize that in some very real sense, it's impossible to escape being Christian in the white Western world. Yeah,
here's the problem. If you leave Christianity, if good people leave Christianity tilts a little bit worse and it doesn't go away. It's still the religion with the most weapons and the most wealth and the most people and all the rest. And so, there's a certain sense that those of us, it's a little bit like having white skin. I wish I could get rid of this white skin. I don't like what it represents. in one sense, I understand the privilege, but I don't like the idea of privilege, right? But I have it. And so my job is, how can I use my white skin to help people who've been hurt by this? How can I use my identity as a white man to embody a different kind of humanity? And I think we have to do that as Christians too, you know, Catholic, Protestant, you know, Seventh-day Adventist, Mormon, whatever you know, a person's inherited, Muslim, Jewish, Hindu, Buddhist, we all, just the fact that we're human beings with a history, we have a legacy of heroism and a legacy of despicable, indefensible cruelty and ignorance and bigotry. And this is part of what it means to be human. How do we negotiate that? And it's a reason to be a nomad, because we're on a journey of learning more and understanding more and so on.
Totally. And so this last question is one, I'm just very interested to see how you respond to this, because I've been reflecting on this myself. Is there any one aspect of your belief that maybe you came to early on when you first kind of encountered Christianity that has remained the same throughout the entirety of your life? I just wonder.
Yeah, I would say no. Even the things that have been most consistent. So I told you I had this very powerful experience when I was just about to turn 15. And that experience was this powerful experience of being loved. I felt the love of God, and I felt the love of God not just for me. I felt it for the grass and the trees and the stars and the sky and other human beings. And I mean, it was such a powerful experience of the love of God. And so that has certainly remained consistent. I'm so grateful that that was my sort of baptism into a real spiritual experience, was an experience of love. That has really been consistent. But I have to say that when I say love, I think I know what I know a little bit more of what love means than I knew then. And when I say God, I think I know a little less of what God means when I know than I knew then. But in another sense, when you know what you don't know, that's another kind of knowing. And so everything, you know, this is part of what it means to be a nomad, part of what it means to be human. We change, our perspective changes, and the accumulated experience that we get in life changes, and we bring who we are to our experience of loving God, loving ourselves, loving our neighbors, loving the earth, and so on.
I love that. I think that's so beautifully put. And I just want to say again, thank you for being part of this journey and helping me both to kind of shape the narrative of this book and my own spiritual life. I really appreciate you.
Well, you are an encouraging human being, Brandon, and you're doing good work. And I'm so glad you're writing. And I hope this book, in its new edition, finds its way into so many people who were you know, however many years ago. When I met you as a student at a super conservative Christian college, you know, you had that spark and that vitality, and there's Brandon's waking up, you know, every day. And I hope they find your book. Thank you for writing it.
Thank you.
Well, what a good opportunity to hear from three powerhouses. I was just reflecting on these conversations, and so much wisdom contained from Diana, Brian, and Richard. I'm so glad that they were willing to share with us today, and for their encouragement on this Nomad's journey. For those of you who are watching, we are a little over halfway through this live stream virtual launch party. I'm so honored that you would join with us tonight to celebrate the North American release of Nomad, and to get to hear from some of the people who have shaped my journey along the way. And I want to go back to that trivia question that we asked. I asked the question, what language other than English has Nomad been translated into? It was at first published in the UK, and so some of you said British, not technically a language, but it's the dialect it was first translated into, and actually this version of the book is still anglicized, but it was translated into one other language. And two of you basically said the same answer at the same time. The answer to the question is it was translated into Dutch. It's this book called Zwerven met God, and I got to go over to the Netherlands and travel around and speak to some people about this book. It actually has got the best cover, I think, out of them all, and then it's got a really big picture of me on the back, which is interesting. But anyways, Zwerven met God, it was translated into Dutch, and so to Doug Hoke and Letta Porter. Doug Hoke and Letta Porter, if you go ahead and send me on my page a message, we'll get your mailing address and we'll send you both a copy of the new book, Nomad, not the Dutch edition. And yeah, thanks for participating. We'll have about 2 more questions later on in the broadcast, so we'll be giving away at least 2 more copies. Stay tuned and get ready for those questions. But one thing I wanted to do is a book launch party, of course, would not be complete without a little reading from the book. And the structure of the book is such that it begins with this concept of wandering, and it ends with the concept of wonder. And that's really the arc of my faith. That's the arc of, I think, everyone's faith journey. That's where we should be going, at least from the wisdom traditions that I've studied. That we begin by asking questions, wandering, seeking, being curious, and then we end up in a place where we stand in wide-eyed wonder at the bigness and beauty of God and the universe, and realizing that in our finite minds, we have no real ability to conceive the infinite. And so we continue to probe the depths of reality, knowing we'll never know the fullness of truth, but getting exhilaration from the glimpses of the divine that we get to see along the way. And so what I want to do is just read a short section from the final chapter of the book. It's that chapter I talk about Father Richard Rohr in, but we won't be reading that passage today. It's called Wonder, and I want to give you a little glimpse of the kind of spirituality that I advocate for even today and that I try to live into. And so this is the final chapter of the book. It begins with a quote from the renowned Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, who says, "Our goal should be to live a life of radical amazement, for to be spiritual is to be amazed." As I stood on the edge of Lake Michigan, looking out over what seemed to be a never-ending body of water, tears... It looks like the video might have cut out. Can you all still see? Let me check. Can somebody leave a comment if you can still see us? We good still? Okay, sorry about that, guys. Technical difficulty on my end. Reading from Wonder. I'll start again. As I stood on the edge of Lake Michigan, looking out over what seemed to be a never-ending body of water, tears formed in my eyes. The lights of the city glittered in the distance, and the deep purple skies began to melt into the horizon. As the gentle breeze wafted across the lake and surrounded me, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was surrounded by the very presence of God. The turmoil and anxieties of my life lay just behind me in the city. But in this moment, I stood, breathed on by the Spirit of God that whispered silently to my soul, "All is well." This moment was a work of divine art, painted by the hands that formed my soul. This moment was all that I needed to know that everything was going to be okay. I didn't know what awaited me the next day, next week, or next year, but that didn't matter. Being concerned about the rightness of my beliefs in this moment seemed laughable, because what words could I ever formulate that would describe what I was experiencing in this moment on this beach? This simple, ordinary moment was all that it took to fill my soul and to restore a deep sense of peace to my heart. This moment was all that I had, and it was more than enough. If I've learned anything on my short journey of faith so far, it is this, that in every circumstance or situation, there is vast, untapped beauty lying just beneath the surface. And I believe that beauty is what we call God. Divine beauty isn't flashy or ostentatious. Instead, it's raw, it's simple, it's modest. When we live our lives with eyes wide open, looking for God's presence in each and every moment, good and bad, we'll live lives of peace, lives filled with purpose, lives filled with wonder. That's what it means to be a Christian, after all. Beyond all of our theology and traditions and practices, to be a Christian means to live every moment consciously aware that in God we live and move and have our being. This is the message Jesus came proclaiming when he said, "The kingdom of God is in your midst." The kingdom is nothing more than the world waking up to the reality that God is our source, the animator of all that is seen and unseen. When Jesus calls for us to be born again, it's so that we can see the kingdom of God, or to become aware of the presence of God in and around us at every moment of every day. When we're awakened to this reality, everything changes. The way we treat our neighbors, our friends, and even our enemies is fundamentally transformed because we understand that they too exist in the presence of God. As Paul writes, we're all his offspring. If Christ is the force that holds everything together, then everything that exists is sacred. Every moment is holy. Every second is pulsating with divine elegance. What would our lives be like if we actually believed all of that? How would we live? How would we face trials and challenges and pain? When we recognize the beauty of God and the beauty of everything else, we cannot help but live with praise on our lips and joy in our hearts. Spiritual nomads of every religion seem to have come to this one fundamental realization, that the way to true and abundant life is to learn to live one's life with wonder. So that is a bit of the final chapter, and that is really kind of an encapsulation of where my theology, my spirituality is today. It's the awareness of God in and through all things. And I feel like this, so many of you I can see in the comments and interacting, this is the same kind of spirituality that so many of us are arriving at. And oftentimes this journey from rigid religion is needed. Father Rohr talked about that, the process of having constructed theology, going through deconstruction, in order to get back to this place of reconstruction where we redeem so much of that which we inherited in a rigid religious place and are able to utilize it in new and healthy ways to not confine us and restrict us, but to expand us. So I hope that you will be compelled by that and that you'll head over to nomadbook.org and pick up a copy on Kindle, on paperback, or by tomorrow we'll be releasing the audiobook on Amazon, so keep your eyes peeled about that. Now, I want to give one more, trivia question? So this will be one, we have two more questions. Here's the next one. This is a trivia question. Whoever writes the right answer first in the comment feed, you'll get a copy of the book Nomad. This one's an easy one, a softball. So, the question is, who is the book Nomad dedicated to? I'll give you a hint. This is a prominent Christian figure. They've already been talked about in an interview thus far. If you go ahead and put that in the comments, we'll go ahead and get you a copy of the book if you get it right. But with that said, we're now going to go and hear a short conversation with two people that I really admire. The first one is the very first person to ever hand me this copy of Nomad in the UK. His name is G. Tanswell. G is an incredible guy. He is a gay Christian man, and he's a police sergeant in Wales. And he also helped with some others start a community called The Gathering in Cardiff, which is an LGBT Christian worship gathering that happens every week in downtown Cardiff in Wales. And it's a beautiful community that I've gotten to visit a number of times in my travels. And G and his faith and the community that he is a part of really inspire me and inspire what I do. And so I was excited to get to chat with him and get a little glimpse of his story and how Nomad intersects with that, his own personal journey. And then we're going to hear from a guy that some of you will know. His name is Danny Cortez. Danny Cortez is an incredible man. You've probably seen his story because he was a Southern Baptist pastor who began changing his mind on the issue of LGBT inclusion, and now really serves as a mentor to so many non-affirming pastors as they walk on their journey towards full affirmation and acceptance of LGBT people. And so we're going to have a little bit of a brief conversation with both of these incredible folks. And while these conversations are going, feel free to continue interacting in the comments and letting us know who you think the book is dedicated to. With that said, let's go to my conversation with G. Tanswell.
And one of the reasons I'm so excited to get to chat with you is exactly that. You picked me up in the airport in, what was the little town?
Bristol.
Bristol.
Yeah.
Back in 2016. And that was when Nomad came out in the UK. And yeah, I've had a few trips over since then, and we've stayed in touch, and I've just really appreciated, one, you personally as a friend, and then also the work that you're doing at the Gathering in Cardiff, which is a community that feels like home to me over there in that side of the world, and even watching you from a distance. So thanks for taking some time to be with me today.
No, thank you. Thank you for inviting me to be part of this. It's really exciting. We got to see your book being launched for the first time in Cardiff, where I don't know if you remember, but you actually spoke in a hall that had been a set from, I can't remember what film it was now, but
Benjamin Cumberbatch.
But
Sherlock.
Right. Okay. But yeah, it was a beautiful grand hall in Cardiff University, and you got to launch this here in Cardiff, and I'm so glad from knowing you and from knowing the journey that you've been on, that you've now got the joy of having it launched and published in your home country. So congratulations! I'm really, really thrilled for you.
Well, thank you so much, seriously. And thank you again for helping to create such an incredible event in the UK. I mean, that was a journey I never thought I would get to have. I didn't think I'd be crossing the ocean and doing this book in particular in that part of the world. But I feel like so much of my life and my faith today has been shaped by the relationships I've gotten to have because of the travels I've gotten to take over to your part of the world. And so the first kind of, to get into your journey a little bit, you've also had a bit of a progression in some ways, spiritually and also in regards to being LGBT. And I just wonder if you can give us a little overview of like what prompted you to start moving in a more inclusive, open direction, individually and with your faith.
Do you know what? I'll always remember coming to know God personally in Aberystwyth in West Wales, which is a tiny little town, which next time we're in Wales we will go to, and I'll take you there. It'll be wonderful. But yeah, and that's where I really got to know God for the first time. And I was engaged to a girl, and very much living that Christian sort of conservative, evangelical, biblical life of, you know, no sex before marriage and everything being about God. And do you know what? This week I've been going through my study, just tidying things up, and I found loads of little things that I'd kept that I didn't know that I'd kept, and I found this from the 17th of April 2005, and I remember this day vividly. And I've written down in like a diary, had really cool time with God last night, where he said, "Humble yourself, and I will give you the nations." And then my partner at the time texted me Colossians 3:12 to 15. And yeah, it was a really, really beautiful, wonderful moment where I felt love, and I felt unconditional love. Now, I knew who I was. You know, okay, I was engaged to a girl, but I knew exactly who I was. And coming from a very Anglican background, where the worship and the liturgy is very much about like pardoning for sin and bringing your sin before God, I felt I was constantly bringing that. I was bringing that to God. That whole thing of just the thoughts that were in my head are sinful, and I need to repent of those things, even though I have no control over them whatsoever. I need to repent of them and ask for forgiveness, because that's the only way that I'm going to be accepted by God. And I think I believed that my fiance and I could get married, have children, and that would just make everything fine. And then I realized it wasn't. That wasn't going to happen. And so I broke off the engagement. And I'll remember another moment with God then, where I was actually in the church on my own. One of the vicars had been talking to me about ordination, which seems to be a constant theme, but there we are. We'll keep ignoring that. That's what I keep doing. And yeah, the vicar, I was in the church on my own, and I'll always remember it, that this vision, and God speaks to me in visions. I get a lot of really visual type messages from God generally, and this vision was of me with a veil, and it was a black veil. Don't know why it was black. Maybe somebody can tell me a little bit more about that. I don't know, but it was a black veil, and then it came off, but with it came off a huge amount of a weight. And later that year, I started coming out to people in my church. I'll always remember doing it on like a one-to-one basis, and there were like 15 people I needed to speak to in one night. So I literally just went bang, bang, bang around all these people. Just, let's go have 2 minutes in the back room. I just need to tell you something. And and yeah, we were having these chats. And do you know what? That was that veil. And I realized then that actually I had been doing so many other things that I needed to repent of, that I needed to bring before God. And for me, it was actually the work of the devil, the work of Satan, in making me feel that my true sin was me just being me. And that actually by taking that veil off, and by just being able to express myself as a proud person before God, I was able to actually identify, oh, do you know what, G, there's a couple of other things you really need to kick into touch and sort out in your life, because they are not glorifying you and they are not glorifying God. And that goes back to that whole thing of humble yourself, and I will give you the nations. The journey's not been easy, similar to your journey. Your journey's not been easy either. And you know, I've been kicked out of churches on multiple occasions because of who I am. And you know what? Like, it's not fine, but I can walk away from that and say, do you know what? Okay, I'm not welcome there. And for me, that's why the gathering was born, because what I was finding was a lot of the inclusive churches were generally churches which had very, very traditional worship, very sort of high church. The higher church, a church, generally the more inclusive it would be. And that wasn't my worship. I've been a conservative evangelical. You know, I was used to bands and stages, and which you talk about in your book, and like this whole thing of just like walking into a theatre sort of thing. And that for me was how I really found God, through that type of worship. And I longed for that. You know, I longed for that connection back with God, and that style of worship. And I couldn't find it. I couldn't find it in a place where I could also be me. And so myself and a couple of other friends got together and said, right, well, actually, we all believe that God loves us for who we are. We all believe that we can worship God in the way that we want to worship God. So let's just do it. Let's just gather together and do it. And we called it The Gathering. And that was 9 years ago. and now we're coming up to 10 years next year, and it is so exciting. It's so exciting that we're in this situation where a small gathering of people who just were desperate to find a home have been able to turn that longing, that quite selfish longing, into a church that glorifies God, that brings people in, that we've been baptizing people over the last year. It's been wonderful. And just really truly seeing God at work. And I can see that all of those bits of that journey were really important bits of that journey for me. You know, none of it was irrelevant. It was all really, really important. And some of it was painful, but you know, I've got a tattoo on my leg that says, "If you want the rainbow, you have to deal with the rain," which I believe is a Dolly Parton lyric, but I didn't know that when I had the tattoo. But that is so true, isn't it? If you want the rainbow, sometimes you have to deal with the rain. And that's exactly what being a nomad is all about, isn't it?
Yeah, I love that. And yeah, Pastor Danny Cortez, although you're not pastoring a church at the moment, it is good to see you. And our journeys kind of intersected because when all the stuff around my book originally started, you were pastoring a Southern Baptist church up in La Mirada, California. And essentially during that time, you risked everything to love and extend love to your gay child. I wonder if you could just give us a little recap about, like, what was that internal process like for you, and that struggle between how to love your child and how to also hold a faith that was kind of rigid and exclusive?
Yeah, so it actually didn't start with my child. It started with LGBTQ members of my church that I sensed weren't being loved well, and that our theology was, in fact, harming them. And so that was a struggle for me, because as a pastor who committed himself to caring for his community, I just saw right off the bat that things weren't going well. And so there was about like a 6-year process for me in trying to figure out the biblical texts and getting to know people in the community that kind of revolutionized my understanding of scripture, and I guess overturned a lot of the stereotypes I had of the LGBTQ community. And so, in that process, I actually had this revelation and the shift in my theology where I became affirming. And that's when my son came out, when he found out that I was a safe person to come out to. And so, because of that, I'm so grateful that it was because of LGBTQ people that helped me to see what love looks like, that allowed me to be a safe person for my son, which allowed me to, in turn, father him the way he needed to be parented. And so, it's been, I have such a debt to my LGBTQ friends for, literally saving me, right? From my oppressive ways, and just helping me to, just undo a lot of my harmful theology and practices. So that's filtered through across, to the church and everywhere else.
Yeah, it's so funny to me and disheartening to me how obviously Christian theology emerged in its earliest days from the margins, and that's how theology was done and constructed. And over the years, obviously dominant power forces have kind of taken it and created it to be their own tool. And it does take a lot of bravery to make that transition out of a system that one is declared to be God's truth, and eternal souls are on the line. And when you did make that transition, you just like I did, we experienced a lot of fear from the broader evangelical community, a lot of anger. Both of us had our little brush with Al Mohler, and like seeing that kind of Christianity react negatively against us seeking to love, essentially. How were you processing that reaction at that time from the broader Christian community?
I mean, it was really difficult because a lot of these people that were reacting against me were people that I had looked up to. They were my mentors. They were my teachers. I spent a lot of money on their books, attended their conference. And to now be labeled as someone who was opposed to the teachings of Scripture was very, it was just kind of this like, oh my gosh, what kind of reality am I in now? But at the same time, it was like I was able to take a step back and realize, my goodness, don't they see what's really going on? And so even though there was a lot of negativity and a lot of harsh words, there was like this, in the midst of the hurricane, right? This feeling of like, I'm so at peace with this because now I see so clearly how awesome God's love is, and how God is all about liberation and freedom and love. And so, in one sense, it was disappointing, but in another sense, there's now the sadness, right, towards those teachers, and just like this hope that they will one day figure this out. And so there's a part of me, right, like the Apostle Paul, that I wish for my people. I hope for their salvation, and that's really where I'm at. I still love them, but I severely disagree with a lot of the things they're doing.
Yeah, I really love that. I've actually never thought of Paul's words that way, but it's so real, because I also experience, and it's weird to experience that sense of deep affinity towards that kind of Christianity still, and those people, and like this understanding that like I do care about you, and I do believe that a lot of the folks in that more oppressive, repressive theology are doing it because they feel like they have no other option to do but to do it. Which kind of brings us to the work that you're up to today, which is, in a sense, helping to shepherd pastors, church leaders, parents along this journey, and to help them kind of on their own nomadic experience, so to speak, to step beyond the rigid boundaries they might have and experience a broader way of being Christian and a broader way of being human in the world. What has your experience been since starting Estuary Space, and what does that journey look like for you now?
I started this nonprofit because, for one, I mean, an estuary is a space where the freshwater river runs into the ocean. And I found out in an estuary that there are fish that actually change, right, from being freshwater to saltwater fish, and vice versa. And there's this literal non-binary place in creation. And I think that's where we're at as a society within churches, that churches are shifting. And oftentimes, we think that either you're affirming or non-affirming, but for most churches, there's actually a process that has to happen. And so what I do is I provide a place of dialogue and pastoral consultation for church leaders. Because as someone that has gone through that shift, I know a lot of the nuances that occur, and just a lot of the challenges. And so I've been able to provide just a place for pastors and church leaders to ask questions and to push them right in their theology, to be unashamedly, someone that is affirming, and yet to have a dialogue that respects where they're at. And I know that it's theology and beliefs is not like a light switch that can be turned on and off. I wish it were so, but that's not the case. A lot of times it's because a lot of these people haven't been able to interact with LGBTQ people in a genuine way, where they've met people who are, living their true selves out. And so a lot of what I do actually is connect these faith leaders to voices in the community, and that's really who we need to hear from. And so that's kind of what I've been doing in terms of consultation. It's really connecting people.
I love it. It's such important work, and I think all of our experience, from what I've heard in conversations we've had with other folks as well, that the transformation of belief and theology really doesn't come by talking about belief and theology. It comes through exactly what you're saying, that connection, that relationship, that empathic experience of knowing what another person experiences and feels. I think kind of the last big question that I'm interested to see what you're experiencing today. What is the singular thing that you see that's holding people back from actually taking the first step? Because it's easy to demonize, again, conservatives of whatever type and say that it's just their own power that they're trying to preserve, or their paycheck that they're trying to preserve. And I think there's a lot of that. But what else? What's the belief that's preventing people from taking a step towards a more inclusive theology?
I think a lot of it is just how we read scripture, right? I mean, we've a lot of times conservative evangelicalism reads scripture in a way that is divorced from real people. And so we try to understand scripture without seeing its impact on others. And I think one of the things I try to guide people into is that the way Jesus taught was showing how, religious leaders' beliefs were negatively impacting people who were in the margins. And I think that's what the evangelical community needs to do more of. Not so much parse Greek words or try to, exegete a text, but exegete like the consequences of their theology. And that's what's severely lacking in evangelicalism. And that's why I think people who are in minority groups, whether it's race or gender or sexual identities, they're the ones that really need to, that we need to pay attention to. And so if we could do more of that, to read scripture the way Jesus reads scripture. I know you talk a lot about this. It's just like this understanding that Jesus wants us to understand that God in a way that incarnates love. And that to me is the ultimate test. Is it loving? Is it causing harm? Those are the things that I think we're missing.
Totally. Well, Pastor Danny Cortez, I am so grateful for you, the work that you're doing in the world, and for the way that we've been able to walk together in parts of our journey through this process. And thank you for taking the time to join me today for the launch of Nomad 2.0. So
yeah, I'm so glad that you're relaunching this really powerful book. And I pray that everyone gets a hold of it and just passes it around. You're doing great work, Brandan. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much to G. Tanswell and to Danny Cortez. Both are doing incredible work, and both of their, Danny's nonprofit and G's community is linked in the Facebook feed, so I hope you'll check out The Gathering Cardiff and Estuary Space, two really incredible gifts and ministries to our world. So, I asked the last trivia question. It was, who was the book dedicated to? That was a softball one, and again, two people came in at pretty much the same time. So the winners of that question are Tyler Schwartz and David Key. So if you, Tyler and David, you can message Brandan Robertson the page, let me know your address, we will send you a copy of Nomad. The question was, who is the book dedicated to? And the answer is Phyllis Tickle. If you don't know Phyllis, she was an incredible writer at the intersection of spirituality, and also had a lot of kind of prophetic writing about what the future of Christianity in the United States and religion in general would look like. She became a friend, a mentor, much like Brian and Diana and some of the other folks you've seen on here. And right before Nomad was about to be released, we had been communicating pretty regularly. She was going to write the foreword, and then she passed before we had the chance to get that foreword written. But she's an incredible woman. She's somebody I think is a modern saint, and yeah, I really do hope you'll check out Phyllis Tickle if you don't know much about her. Incredible woman. So, we're coming into the home stretch. We've got 2 more conversations for you, but before we go to that, I'm going to do one more trivia question, and this one maybe the hardest of them all. It can be found on Google, but we'll see who can do that the quickest. The question is this: what was the original subtitle of Nomad? Remember that I signed a book contract with a conservative publisher. They were about to publish the book, so all of that title and all of that cover had been released publicly, and it still exists on the internet, but it shifted significantly when I went to go publish it with Dart, Longman, and Todd. So if you can get this answer, whoever the first one is, you're going to have a great reward in heaven and also a great book. And again, as we're coming to the end, I do want to say thanks. We've had consistently a good number of people watching this whole time. I'm so grateful for your support. I'm grateful to be able to have this space online in the midst of this pandemic, to cultivate what is a global community, to be able to get together as progressive people of faith, people on a journey, and share our experiences and stories with one another, which is really what I feel called to help do. It's really what I hope Nomad helps you do. So again, thank you all for joining us tonight, and I hope you'll check out, again, Nomad at nomadbook.org. And I just found out, I've been saying the audiobook will be released tomorrow, and literally during this live stream, the publisher sent an email. It'll be available in a couple weeks. So stay tuned to nomadbook.org for the audiobook release. It's coming soon, but the Kindle, the ebook, and the paperback are all available today. So, with that said, our final two guests tonight are, again, two people who have been great friends and inspirations to me. The first one is Debbie Lee. Debbie Lee is the author of a book called Rescuing Jesus: How Queer People of Color and Women Are Reclaiming Evangelicalism, is I think what the subtitle was. She wrote this book, I think back in 2016. Our books came out around the same time, and I connected with her. And one was just captivated by her kindness, her gentleness, and her desire to help uplift unheard voices. And then also she just is a powerful activist, a powerful person pushing for change, both in the church and outside of the church. And so I was really grateful to get a chance to chat with her about her experience with the evangelical community personally and her journey outside of that. And then the final person we'll hear from tonight is a good friend of mine named Jonathan Merritt. You might know Jonathan from a number of books he's written. His latest book is called Speaking God from Scratch. He's also a popular journalist. He writes for Religion News Service, Washington Post, all the big outlets. And Jonathan is somebody who, his faith journey has paralleled mine, and you'll hear a little bit about that in our interview. Literally from the time of my teenage years, Jonathan's family has been impacting my spiritual journey, and now Jonathan and I have kind of ended up in similar spiritual places, and so I was really excited to get to chat with him. So with that said, let's go ahead and listen into these final two conversations with Debbie Lee and Jonathan Merritt.
So your work as a journalist has taken you into conversations with interesting people on kind of all sides of some of the most controversial issues, especially in, of course, the religious and political space. And there seems to be a lot, in my experience, of fear on all sides of talking to the other. And even today, we hear language, whether it's good or bad, I'm not sure, of like cancel culture and things like that, based on like, if we hear something that might be offensive or that we don't like, or if we have a caricature of a group of people, it seems like we've just kind of increased this level of fear in engaging with our others. I wonder what you think about that as a journalist, as somebody who's literally spending your time asking questions of difficult people in difficult circumstances. Like, do you have any insight on why we've become so afraid of people who have different perspectives and maybe any path forward?
Yeah, it is hard to see that. And, you know, there's part of it is being human, I think. You know, we're survival beings. We're looking for our tribe. We're looking for the people who in our pack who are going to protect us. We have, you know, the lizard brain that's going to light up every time something different, something new, something potentially scary arises, and we go into protective mode. But then we have our, our prefrontal cortex, our executive functioning brain that can overcome that and can look at the world through eyes of reason, through eyes of compassion. And it's a battle within ourselves. And I think we all experience it. I think we all experience fear when something or someone new seems to take over the world that we once knew. And I think it's up to us and to ourselves individually and as a community and as a society to create a world where we can access that executive functioning, that part of our brain that does executive functioning and says, no, like this might seem scary. However, there are ways that I can process this. There are ways that I can relate to something that is different or someone that is different. I'm saying thing and someone, something, because I'm thinking of like many things that are fearful right now. It's like coronavirus, like coronavirus is scary. Like white supremacists are scary. There's all these, it feels right now we're in this heightened state. And I think it takes a lot of self-awareness, a lot of centering, a lot of meditation, whatever spiritual tools or whatever cognitive tools you need to be healthy and rested and feel safe. We need that first to engage with the wider world. And so in terms of a path forward, I would say being setting up our society so we are caring for one another, and so we are feeling that sense of safety, and then being open to the other, and being open, especially when it's a person, being open to another because they're a human being, and because there's so much that we can gain from that relationship. There's so much we can learn from being with people who are not like us. And when you think about just the beauty of humanity and how that diversity it's additive, it adds more to our lives. And the more we have, the more we can engage with each other in a way that's healthy and in a way that's safe, the more that we get out of that.
Yeah, I really love also the perspective you brought, kind of thinking about it in the two areas of the brain, because I think it's so important. My own journey has taught me sitting, listening, learning from people who I even may perceive as enemies has helped me in so many ways. And like pastorally, there is also an importance. If people are being triggered in that lizard brain, that's something to notice. It's probably a sign of trauma. There's probably a sign of probably a legitimate reason for them to be kind of fight or flighting. And so, I feel like that's the unique tension we're all being called into, is like, how do we cultivate, like you said, safeness and help people heal without also saying anybody who says anything that might not align with us can't be in our community, because I don't think either one of those would serve us very well if we just keep triggering people or we completely silo ourselves. So
and I think it's really important to think of it in terms of a spectrum too, because we're not all at that place of having compassion and openness to everyone. Some people might be at a place where like they are just being triggered, and so okay, you don't feel safe right now, like get to safety, get to a place where you find the people who can care for you. And then as we start to open up and engage in ways that feel safe to us, and take small risks, we can start to move to that place of compassion and to that place of really seeing someone who may feel like a threat to us as really just another person who's scared, another person who's acting out their own past traumas or stories. And if we can find a way to connect with them and if we need to. We don't always have to, but if we can, if it's necessary, if it's healing, if it's helpful, if it knits the fabric back together, like we can engage, and some really amazing things can come out of that. And I feel like just professionally, that's the work that's the work that you have to do as a journalist and as a pastor, right? Like you can't, like if you're pursuing a story, it's you, or you're counseling someone, you don't draw a line because they disagree with you or they seem threatening to you. You obviously have your own boundaries of safety, but you also have a degree of openness that is just, part of the job and part of what you're called to do. And that's actually what makes life so exhilarating too, because you learn so much from people who are different.
Yeah. That lizard brain is both the fight or flight response, but also that adrenaline response. It's like, it's the good stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, well, Jonathan Merritt, thank you so much for taking some time to be with me today to help celebrate the launch, the US launch of Nomad. It's been a crazy journey with this book, but also I feel so interested, like my journey with you and your family has been interesting in the sense that I grew up watching your dad on TV, and I interviewed him when I was 16 years old on my little internet radio show I had. And then I interviewed you in my early 20s while I was at Moody Bible Institute. And then while writing this book, ended up Skyping with you and kind of getting some advice. And then from then we've been in similar circles and crossed paths and had a friendship. So it feels super interesting I feel like you and your family and your life kind of are the entirety of the journey of this book. And you've also gone through a similar evolution of faith over those years. I wonder if you could talk just a little bit about what that journey and like what provoked you to start stepping beyond kind of the rigid religion that we both come from into a broader version of spirituality.
Yeah. If I was raised by a televangelist. I was raised by, when I was growing up, when I was actually graduating high school, he was president of the Southern Baptist Convention, which is obviously a very large, very conservative denomination. And that was my whole context. We were very good friends with Jerry Falwell, the senior. And of course, I went to Liberty University. I went to a Southern Baptist seminary. And after that, I went to a United Methodist seminary. I'm now living and taking classes at an Episcopal seminary here in New York City. I've relocated, but I taught with him as a teaching pastor for many years before I moved here. And there were a lot of changes that happened. And I'll just say, my transformation is so true to my evangelical heritage, because I changed primarily because I learned how to read the Bible, frankly. I'd like to say that Mother Mary showed up and, put a drop of water on my tongue and I woke up it was not that. It's like, I just learned to read the Bible, and the God that I found in the Bible when read in a thoughtful way was not at all the God that I had been shown. And so I think there are like two paths when you encounter these moments. The Celts called them threshold moments. The moments in your life where you read something or you see something and it's like a hammer falls. And there's a before and there's an after. And in the after, all of the tools and skills and assumptions that you need are different than the ones you needed in the before. And so you have a choice. You can go back and pretend that you live in a world that no longer exists, or you can leave the conversation altogether. You can just say, to hell with all this. But there's another way, and I think you in this book, you were in so many ways, you were way ahead of the conversation, which is just now really emerging, at least in the United States, which is what would happen if we stayed, but we did it differently. doesn't mean that everybody has to become that nomad, that they have to stay on the path or on the journey. Yeah. Even if they go off path, they're on the journey. Yeah. But I think increasingly people are actually choosing that. It's not that you have to stay or go, but that you can remain on this journey and do it your own way, in a way that feels true and right to you. And I think so many people are doing that. I think you've sort of spearheaded that for a growing community. And that would be something I'd say, yes. When I read this book, especially if you just read the title and the subtitle, I'm like, that's me, a nomad, which now you kind of cornered the market on that phrase, but it's a phrase that I would ascribe to. I would say, yes, that's me. I'm a spiritual nomad.
Totally. Yeah, and I think one of the things I talk about in the book, but it's also true in my journey, is fear kept me for so long from being able to take that first step beyond whatever that threshold is. In the book and in my life, I use the Abraham story from Genesis chapter 12 of God calling Abraham to leave everything he knew behind and start walking into an unknown land. And it says that God will show him. It's like there's no direction. You have no clue where you're going, but trust the Spirit. And the fact that Abraham did that, verse 4 of Genesis 12 says, thus Abraham departed. It's like he hears God, he goes. That bravery is something that I feel like it's so rare. And so few of us actually are able just to, when we start having suspicions about our faith and we start having some questions about the things that we were taught, it takes a lot to be able to step over and begin to explore other ways of seeing and being. What keeps people back? Why is that fear so prevalent, not just in our evangelical tradition, but in most religious traditions? What keeps people there?
Well, there are so many answers, but I'll give some of the ones that come to mind. For one, there is just the tribalistic instincts of any closed group. Like, what keeps a Mason being a Mason? What keeps a person being in the PTA long after they've been worn out by it? There are these kinds of group dynamics where you begin to depend on people for things. People begin to depend on you for things. There's these kinds of interconnected sets of obligations that form a kind of glue that holds a person in place, irrespective of the beliefs that that community is predicated on. Yeah. Now you add a layer of beliefs, and in this case, you add a layer of fundamentalist theology. Fundamentalist theology has all kinds of self-sealing triggers in it. It has ways of indoctrinating people, particularly children, in formative stages, with the kinds of triggers that don't only just keep them here, but keep them in line and keep them active in the way you want them to. Some of that is this kind of Old Testament, and I should be careful the way that I say that, because you can take that to an almost anti-Semitic extreme. And I'm not saying that this is a lesser version of God. I'm saying that when you take this system, you can corrupt it in a way. But the God that we more often find in the Hebrew Bible has a kind of divine conditionality. So, good things for good people and bad things for bad people. And you just enter into a community where they say leaving is bad. Listening to people who may tell you to leave is bad. This has a kind of self-sealing effect, where to change your mind means to be ejected from the community, to be unloved by God. There are shunning mechanisms, shaming mechanisms. There are you may even lose your place in your family. You've worked a lot on LGBTQ equality and talked to any gay, lesbian, bisexual, queer, transgender, whatever, youth. And there's a huge fear that, to be true to me, yes, it means rejecting the false self, but it also means choosing to be ejected from your community, ejected from your family, to be called a heretic, to be called a bad person, to be seen as untrustworthy and skeptical. And that is a high price to pay for someone who doesn't know, as you talk about, where are you going, the unknown place, what will happen on the other side of coming out. You know what it's going to cost you, but you really don't know until you do it what the payoff is. And that's true, I think, for a lot of nomads.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Debbie and Jonathan. Both of their work is linked in the comments. They're incredible people. And what I want to let you know, now that we're coming to the very end of our virtual live stream event, is that I'm planning on taking the broader conversations that I've had with all of these amazing guests tonight. I had to edit down the conversations. This has already been a 2.5-hour event. But the full conversations I'm going to be releasing on my podcast, The Quest, with some commentary about each of the chapters of the book. And so I'll do a chapter, we'll talk about that topic, and I'll share my conversation with each of these guests on the Quest podcast. So make sure you go over to wherever you get your podcasts, search for that and subscribe. They'll be coming in a few weeks. Now, I asked a hard question. What was the original subtitle of my book? And someone got it quicker than a couple others. I think there are 3 or 4 people that actually found it. But this cover you see behind me is the original cover of Nomad, back with the conservative Christian publisher. A couple weird things about this cover to note. The book is called Nomad, and they chose an ocean. Enough reason to leave that publisher behind. No offense, publisher. I mean, yes, take offense, publisher. Anyways, so the subtitle was Not So Religious Thoughts on Faith, Doubt, and the Journey in Between. And that subtitle actually came because Nomad was supposed to be my version of a book that transformed my life in that season, which was Donald Miller's Blue Like Jazz. And it has a very similar subtitle, something like that. So the person who got it right, Andrew Ross, good work, Googling, good reading, whatever you did. Go ahead and message me and we will get your address and send you a copy of the book. So again, I just wanted to say thank you. Before we go, I'm going to read just one more small section of the book, but for those of you who've popped in and joined us for some time, for those of you who have been here the whole time, I hope that this space tonight that we've provided has been encouraging to you. It has for me. And I hope that you will pick up a copy of Nomad, not just to support me as an author, but because I really do want to share my spiritual journey, some of the lessons I've learned, because I think, I have a suspicion, and from pastoring and traveling and speaking, I've seen that so many of us are on this journey. So many of us just need a little encouragement, permission to know that it's okay to ask questions, permission to know, like Abraham, it's okay to step beyond the boundaries of our religion and inheritance and go into a new land. And I really hope that Nomad can be that permission slip. I hope that I can be a nomad with you on this sojourn of spirituality and life. So again, if you want to find out more about Nomad, visit nomadbook.org. And kind of by way of benediction, I just want to read from one of the first chapters. Remember, I read from the last chapter of the book called Wander. I'm going to read the conclusion to the part of the book, the second chapter, called Wander. And this is what I wrote. This is the value of wandering. The value of breaking the rules and leaving the backyard where we know we're safe and wandering into a strange and unknown territory. Every time I've wandered in my faith, I've ended up experiencing God in fresh ways. I've come to see that exploration is not a practice of the unfaithful, but rather exactly what being a follower of Christ is actually about. If you've ever read through the Gospels, then you know that Jesus is always pushing his followers to move beyond their comfort zones. He led them into uncomfortable and often unkosher, pun intended, situations. He caused them to have far more questions than answers. I believe the reason Jesus did this was because he was far more interested in allowing his disciples to cultivate a relationship and trust with and in him than landing at a place of arrival. Jesus wasn't worried about giving anyone any answers. He was interested in leading them on a journey. Jesus created spiritual nomads, not doctrinal guards. Jesus stirred up doubt in the minds of those who thought that they had it all figured out, and he honored the seekers. Those who sought after God had to remain humble. Those who thought they had God all figured out were oppressive and proud. I've experienced the same reality in my own life. James, Jesus' little brother, reminds us that God resists the proud and gives grace to the humble. It's only when we learn to value our wandering and the lack of knowing and find ourselves relying on the untamable wind of God's Spirit to guide us into uncharted waters that we receive grace and truth. Following God is about wandering down roads less traveled and discovering the pearl of great price buried within a field. When we begin to understand that this is a pattern of life that we're called to follow, our lives will change radically. We no longer find our identity or value in having the right theology or being a part of the right denomination. Instead, we recognize that we, along with the rest of humanity, are just sojourners in this life. Our eyes are opened and we begin to discover Jesus hanging out in unexpected places with the most unlikely of people all around us. Life becomes a scavenger hunt, following after the wind of God's Spirit off the beaten path, never knowing where we're heading, but trusting that wherever it is, God will be there, and it's going to be amazing. Wandering has become the foundation of my spiritual life, and the journey down each new path and into each new tribe of people is absolutely thrilling. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for taking some time tonight to celebrate the launch of this book, bringing it to North America. If you do get a chance to read, listen, get a copy of the book, I want to encourage you, could you please head over to Amazon and leave a review. These reviews in the early days, a simple review, a couple sentences, whatever your star rating might be, really help the book to gain visibility, and as a new author, it really helps to make sure that the book can get a fair hearing in the increasing market of Christian literature. And I hope that this book is a balm in the Christian market that can heal some of the toxic theology that's out there. So if you do get a copy, I would love it if you head over, leave a review on Goodreads, on Amazon. That would be so helpful. But with all of that said, I want to say thank you all so much. I really appreciate you taking the time. Thank you for interacting in the comments. Thanks to all of my guests. And with that said, I hope that you all have a good evening. Have a good night. Peace.